This will be for the Kuta software worksheet using the quadratic formula. So the instructions say solve each equation with the quadratic formula. So we'll go over the formula in a moment. I just want to say that the quadratic formula is used when the equations are in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, you have to set it equal to 0 as your first step. And when there's no coefficient in front of the variable, that is just a 1. Okay, and if they might not use x for the variable, they might use a different letter like m. Okay, but these letters a, b, and c are the coefficients in front of the variable. So generally you want to write this in order of decreasing exponents, the x squared first, the x second, and the constant term with no variable last. Okay, here the a would just be 1, the b value would be -5, okay, and the c value would be -14. So make sure you watch your plus minus signs. So I want to jump to a little bit more challenging problem. For the first one, we'll do number 7. Okay, we said the first step is to set it equal to 0. Okay, so we have a 4 over here. The opposite of positive 4 is -4. And you want to do that to both sides. Okay, bring down your 4b squared. Bring down your positive 8b. 7 minus 4 is positive 3. And 4 minus 4 is 0. All right, so we can see from this here, if we line it up with the equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We can see that a is 4. B is 8, and C is 3. Okay, and now we're going to use the formula. The quadratic formula is going to be -b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So now we just plug in the numbers. Okay, -b is going to be -8 plus or minus radical b squared, so that's 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 3. And that whole thing is divided by 2 times a, so that's 2 times 4. Okay, we have -8 plus or minus, and I suggest you do everything under the square root. So you can do this on the calculator or by hand. 8 squared is 64, and this is going to be minus 16 times 3. 4 times 4 is 16 times 3. That is 30 plus 18, or 48. Okay, so 64 minus 48. Well, 64 minus 50 is 14, so that's going to be 16. All right, feel free to use the calculator. And denominator, 2 times 4 is just 8. Now, you need to know simplifying square roots before you do this worksheet, okay? But I'll show you. Well, on this one, okay, on this one it's easy because it's just radical 16. But some of them you'll have to simplify the square root. Okay, so we have -8 plus minus, and radical 16 is just 4, and that's divided by 8. Okay, so we have 2 separate answers here. And really, at this point, if you want, it might be easiest if you cancel. Okay? Now remember, if you have something like 2a plus 4b over 2c, each of these terms is divided by the common denominator. So in that case, you're going to have to cancel on all three of them, okay? 2 divided by 2 cancels, but 4 divided by 2 is just 2. And that will leave you with a plus 2b over c. Okay, so you need to do the same thing here. These are all divisible by 4. So negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. 4 divided by 4 is 1. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. All right, so that might help on some of the problems. Anyhow, we have negative 2 plus or minus 1 divided by 2. So negative 2 plus 1 is going to be negative 1, and that's divided by 2. And the other answer, negative 2 minus 1, is going to be negative 3, and that's also divided by 2. So those are your two answers. Okay, in case you missed that in the numerator, I'll write it out. Negative 2 plus 1 over 2, and we did negative 2 minus 1 over 2. So this was negative 1/2, and this was negative 3/2. Okay, please pause and try number 8. And again, remember your first step is to set it equal to 0. Okay, and I left the formula here for you, so please try it. Number 8. Okay, first step, we want it equal to 0. Here we have a negative 10. The opposite of negative 10 is positive 10. So you want to do that to both sides. Bring down your 2m squared. Bring down your negative 7m. Negative 13 plus 10 is negative 3. And 10 minus 10 cancels. That just equals 0. All right, so this equation is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, so we're going to use our formula. We can see that a is 2. We can see that b is negative 7, and we can see that c is negative 3. Okay, so here we have negative b. So negative, and b is negative 7. So it's going to be the negative of negative 7. Okay, watch your plus minus signs. And this is plus minus radical b squared. So that's going to be negative 7 squared. Okay, use the parentheses on that. And minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 3. And that whole thing is divided by 2 times a, which is 2. Okay, make sure you use parentheses when you square the negatives, okay? Because if you do negative 7 squared, that's going to be negative 49. But if you use parentheses, negative 7 squared, that's positive 49, because the two negatives combined times each other is a positive. All right, so those are two different things. Make sure you use the parentheses. Okay, the negative of negative 7, the two negatives in a row is positive. Plus minus radical. Okay, you can do this on the calculator or in your head if you want. Negative 7 squared is 49. And negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Times negative 3 is positive 24. Okay, so be careful. There's two negatives here, so it's going to be a positive 49 plus 24, that's 73. Okay, so under the square root, we just have radical 73. And that's divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, so I don't think we can break up the 73. Okay, and I'll give you a quick hint here. If you add the two numbers and it's divisible by 3, then the original is divisible by 3. For instance, if you do 7 plus 3, that's 10. Okay, but if you try to divide 10 by 3, you're going to get a remainder of 1. It's going to be 3 remainder 1. So it doesn't divide evenly. So that means 73 does not divide evenly by 3. Okay, and it's not even, and it's not divisible by 5 or any of those numbers. So really, this is your final answer. Okay, it's really 2 answers. 7 plus radical 73 over 4 and 7 minus radical 73 over 4. So this was number 8. I'm going to check the answer. Okay, see 2 separate answers. 7 plus radical 73 over 4 and 7 minus radical 73 over 4. Okay, you can just put plus minus if you want to. You don't have to write it twice. All right, so I wrote plus minus instead of two different answers. All right, I'll give you a hint on number 12. You really don't need to use the quadratic formula. Just divide both sides by 5 and take the square root at the end. Make sure you use plus minus when you take the square root of both sides. All right, let's look at number 15. That is a little bit of a challenge. Okay, you want to remember your first step is to set it equal to 0. So we have to get rid of all this stuff here. Now, really, you can go either way, but I would like the squared term or the k squared term to be positive. It doesn't have to be, but I think it's easier. So since this is positive and this is negative, I'm going to try and get this over to the other side. All right, opposite of negative 3k squared is plus 3k squared. All right, do that to both sides. Opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. You do that to both sides. Opposite of negative 2k is positive 2k. You do that to both sides. All right, on the right-hand side, 6 minus 6, 3k squared minus 3k squared, and 2k minus 2k. So we got the 0. On the right, 1k squared plus 3k squared. Negative 31 plus 6 is going to be negative 25. And 2k minus 2k is 0. And that equals 0. Okay, you could use quadratic formula, but now, since we don't have a k term, it's much easier to avoid quadratic formula. All right, so now in this case, we don't need the 0 on one side because we're just going to solve for the k squared. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides here. All right, it cancels here. Bring down your 4k squared. 0 plus 25 is 25. Okay, dividing both sides by 4. The 4's cancel. K squared equals 25 over 4. What's the opposite of squaring something? Take the square root. So you want to take the square root of both sides. Okay, square root of k squared is just k. And remember, when you take the square root, you need to do plus minus. All right. So when you take the square root of a fraction, you do the square root on the numerator. And you also do the square root on the denominator. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 4 is just 2. So there's 2 answers. Plus 5 halves and minus 5 halves, negative 5 halves. Okay, please pause and try number 17. Make sure the first step is to set it equal to 0, so you want to get rid of this here. Okay, so we want a 0 here. The opposite of negative n squared is a positive n squared. Okay, so when you do this, you want to combine it with the like terms, okay, the n squared. So do that to both sides, plus n squared. And this is a 1 here. 8 plus 1 is 9. N squared. Bring down your positive 4n. Bring down your negative 16. N squared minus n squared is 0. All right, and of course, this is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So we can see the a is 9, the b is 14, and the c is negative 16. And now the formula, negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Okay, you don't have to write the formula every time if you know it, but if it helps you, then please do so. Negative b is going to be negative 4. B squared is going to be 4 squared. Okay, again, if this were negative, like negative 4 squared, make sure you use parentheses. Minus 4 times a, which is 9, times c, which is negative 16. And that's divided by 2 times a, or 2 times 9. Okay, so we have negative 4. And for the square root, let me see, 14 squared is 16, and this is going to be negative 36 times negative 16. I need the calculator. So this part right here is positive 576, all right? Watch your signs. This is negative 4 times positive 9 times negative 16. Okay, and then when you combine these two, that's going to be 592. And that's divided by 2 times 9, which is 18. Now, 592 is an even number. Let's see if I can divide it by 4. Okay, we're going to have to simplify the square root here. So for 592, I'm going to try to divide it by 4. Let's see. Okay, that's going to be 4 times 148. And let me see here. All right. And by the way, if you have a number that's more than 2 digits, if the last 2 digits are divisible by 4, then the whole thing is divisible by 4. Okay, so for the 4, that's just 2 times 2. Okay, 4 into 14, well, 4 into 12 goes 3 times. Carry the 2. 4 into 28 is 7. Okay, and of course, the 4 again is going to be 2 times 2. You can't break up the 37, so you circle the last number. 2, 3, 4. You circle all the last numbers. Okay, so under the square root, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 2's and a 37. All right, let's see. Negative 4 plus minus radical. Okay, and we said 4 2's and a 37. So that's going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 37 divided by 2 times 9, which is 18. Okay, now here, whenever you have a number multiplied by itself, you can cancel it and factor one of them out. So 2 times 2, factor out one of those 2's. 2 times 2, again, factor out one of those 2's. And we're left with radical 37. And that's divided by 18. Okay, so these are all even numbers. Let's see. Even numbers are always divisible by 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And 2 times 2 divided by 2 is just 2. So we can cancel one of the 2's. All right, so we have negative 2 plus minus 2 radical 37. And that's divided by 9. And that's it. We can't break this up, and we can't cancel another 2 because the 9 is not an even number. So that's it. Let's check our answer. Okay. Negative 2 plus 2 radical 37 over 9, and negative 2 minus 2 radical 37 over 9. Okay, I just wrote plus minus. It's the same thing. So we got it correct.